Hello everyone, welcome to ASPBAE side event to the APFST. We are starting in 2 minutes. Hi everybody, welcome to ASPBAE side event to the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development on Youth-Led Action Research on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on marginalized youth in 9 countries in the Asia Pacific. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you're all well and in good health. I am Lei Santiago and I'm ASPBAE's Research and Advocacy Officer. Before we begin, just a few reminders. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Zoom, so please mute your audio when you're not speaking, just so we can focus on whoever is speaking at the time. We encourage you to turn on your video and audio when it is your time to speak. We value your contributions and we encourage you to ask questions or comment at the end of the presentation. And during the open forum, please use the raise hand feature and wait to be called should you wish to speak. And you're welcome to use the chat box throughout for any questions or comments, and we'll try to get to them. We are also recording this meeting and live streaming on Facebook. And we will be launching polls and we invite you to participate in them. Our first poll is on the screen right now, and we just want to know where you are joining us from, just to get a read of the room. And from my end, I can see that a majority are from the Southeast Asia, so that's 20. Maybe I should show you the results now. There. Only a few from the Pacific. I think that's Mr. Peter. Oh, and Bernie is here. So maybe 2 of them. And then we have 20 from the Southeast Asia, 4 from East Asia, and 13 from South Asia, and 1 from Central Asia so far. And in the room, we have 50 participants. What a great turnout. Thank you so much for joining us. And yes, I will close the poll now. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box by stating your name, country, and organization, and even a little bit about what you expect to learn from today's event. Because we have more than 50 now, I think before we start, it would be good to have a group photo. If everybody's up for that, I would like to invite everybody to turn on their video so that we can take a group photo, which is customary for every Zoom meeting now. Lovely to see your faces. Okay, we have 3 pages to get through. Please give me your best smile and I will take a screenshot. Say cheese. Next page, please smile. And then the last page. And to shake things up a little bit, we would like to invite you to raise your hand to show support for the Global Partnership for Education's Raise Your Hand campaign, as well as the 1 Billion Voices campaign. So this is so we can, together we can call for urgent action for education, that is campaigning on mobilizing resources to secure the right to education for all children, youth, and adults. So if you have your video on, please raise your hand and I will take another screenshot. If I could request our tech support to do some screenshots as well, that'd be great.
I'm on it.
And for the others, if you don't want to show or turn on your video, you can just click on the raise hand feature. That will also help. Great, thank you everybody. Thank you so much. To kick things off, I am honored to invite ASPBAE Secretary General, Ms. Helen Dabu, to the floor for the welcome and opening remarks. Ms. Helen, take us away.
Thank you so much, Lei, for that. Well done. To our colleagues in this virtual meeting space, good afternoon. I think for some parts of the Pacific, it's good evening or early evening. Good everything, colleagues, whichever time zone you're working on. Let me start by recognizing this incredible moment in our lives when, a year since the onset of the COVID pandemic, we continue to grapple with its incalculable challenges and disruptions it has caused us, both at the individual and societal levels. A year since the COVID pandemic, multiple shadow pandemics have also emerged. This includes the pandemics of great digital divides and school dropouts, the shadow pandemics of unemployment and food insecurity, the shadow pandemics of domestic violence and child marriages, of fake news and social stigma, and of physical and mental health challenges. It is in this great wave of multi-layered and intersectional social, economic, and political challenges that were exposed and exacerbated by the pandemic, ASPBAE has stayed true to its commitment to always put into the spotlight the situation of the most marginalized and vulnerable groups, enabling them to have a voice, freedom, and to exercise their own agency, to articulate their perspectives on what the current contextual challenges mean to them, and how they can be empowered to pursue actions to help contribute in improving their situations and actively contribute to the changes in their communities and societies. As such, ASPBAE stayed true to its commitment when it supported the Youth-Led Action Research, or YAR, on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on marginalized youth in 9 countries in the Asia-Pacific region. This regional report has been produced by ASPBAE with support from the Institute for German Cooperation of the German Adult Education Association International, or DVV International, and it builds on the initial research training and perspectives building work of the youth through the youth-led action research that has been supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, or SDC. This study is born from and within the undocumented voices of different groups of marginalized youth in the Asia-Pacific region during the COVID-19 pandemic. This was anchored in a participatory action research framework and fueled by the first-hand, ground-up narratives and experiences of the youth. And it was a study that was aimed at spotlighting on the COVID-19 pandemic beyond the paradigm of statistics and data points or data sets. Colleagues, this initiative is an essential part of ASPBAE's work in advocating for the right to education and lifelong learning. And within this is our commitment towards adult learning and education, or ALE, which empowers youth and adults to radically transform their lives. It is with great pleasure to welcome you all in this ASPBAE side event for the APFSD, and I'm very grateful to our members, partners, and participants for being with us today. I'm also thankful to our incredible staff team, Thea, Sunil, Lei, and other staff colleagues for helping put this together amidst all the back-to-back events that are happening this week. There's a lot, colleagues, that are happening this week. I would like to extend much gratitude as well to our youth researchers and participants from our members in the region who work with us and trusted us to bring their voices in this platform. Your voices are critical in informing the policies, financing, and programmatic actions of governments as we urge them to build sustainable and resilient education systems to recover from this pandemic and from future crises and contextual challenges. This, I believe, is the main theme of this year's APFSD. May we all find the inputs and discourses in this meeting valuable in our respective work, and on the part of ASPBAE, we remain committed to providing a platform for intergenerational voices to inform our work for the right to education and lifelong learning. Thank you and a warm welcome to all. Over to you, Lei.
Thank you so much, Ms. Helen, for the warm words of welcome and for affirming ASPBAE's commitment to promoting transformative youth and adult education and strong lifelong learning systems. I would like to give you a warm round of applause if that's possible. Now let's turn to a run through of today's program. If I could ask our tech support to flash the program on the screen. Okay, thank you. First off, my colleague, Mr. Sunil Gangavane, ASPBAE Youth Coordinator, along with Manisha Gangode, a Shirini from India, will take us through the youth-led action research on COVID-19, and Bachimig Batsarig, Program Officer of the All for Education AFU Mongolia, another ASPBAE member, will share experiences of the organization's experiences in youth and education work. We are expecting a spirited sharing of the research findings and recommendations from the YAR. And then after that, we will have an open forum just to answer all of your questions and comments. So please feel free to type them in the chat box. And then the second session will present the recommendations for provision and financing of youth education. Ms. Anita Borkar, the Regional Coordinator of the Training for Transformation of ASPBAE, will give us a background and a short introduction on this. And I'm also happy to say that we have Ms. Anita Dighe with us, and she will be presenting a review of the VNRs, the Voluntary National Reviews, from the youth and adult learning and education lens, while integrating youth education in the Sustainable Development Goals. And after that, we have ASPBAE's Regional Advocacy and Campaigns Coordinator, Ms. Thea Soriano, and ENIT Philippines Monitoring and Evaluation Specialist, Michelle Yumuya, to discuss the financing of education based on the recommendations from the YAR. Then we'll have another open forum to address any of your questions or comments. And then finally, that bit about the We Are Ale campaign, I will get to that later. And then we have Mr. Nimesh Monaravilla of the Coalition for Education Development Sri Lanka for the vote of thanks and closing. If anybody has questions about the agenda, please feel free to type them in the chat box. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Sunil.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lei, for sharing us the agenda and also taking us, starting this day. My name is Sunil Gangavane. I'm the youth coordinator based in India. And in this session, I have two dynamic youth leaders from India and Mongolia who will be sharing their insights, research findings, and recommendations with all of us. It's quite strange that last year, March 2020, we were at the place where this tiny virus has just entered in our communities and countries, and we were started to know about it. But then suddenly it has transformed into a giant pandemic, and then it became a true sense, a global pandemic, and it is affecting everyone. Even after 1 year, I think the situation has changed a little. Many of the countries and communities are still struggling to get access to health, get access to vaccination. We are still in the process to rebuild our economies, rebuild our societies, and more than that, it has affected and create a vacuum in our various parts of communities. We have to rebuild education, we have to rebuild our health system, and more than that, communities. In this session, we are going to share with you key highlights, research findings, and recommendations of the regional study we conducted. Before I start with my presentation, we have a short poll for all of us to respond to. And here is on your screen. The question is, what are the challenges that youth are facing due to the COVID pandemic, especially in your communities and countries? So you can choose, it's a multiple choice question, so you can choose more than one, and please submit your answer. Once everyone writes their responses, we will also get to see our poll results.
We are 28 now, Sunil, 29. So
Okay.
I will share the results once there's more people.
Thank you for that. So yes, it's March 2021, and we are still trying to understand how we can come together and rebuild our economies, our societies, and the various systems which we are continuously working in. And I think this kind of dialogues are going to help us to create ideas, solutions to move forward our actions. So yes, can we see some results at this point? Yes. Wow. So dropout of school and learning loss. 84% people are concerned about that. They are witnessing that kind of situation in the education, and definitely that's the major impact we are all seeing. Loss of jobs and incomes is another category. 75% of participants responded to that. Isolation and mental health challenges, that is another category we also observed in our research, and it is quite a big challenge and violence at home, and fake news and misinformation. So gender-based violence, violence with children, against women, I think the reported cases which what we are reading in the reports and newspapers are one, but there are many unreported cases which generally go unnoticed. So definitely that is another category. You also mentioned about no participation in decision making in COVID-19 responses. 50% of participants sharing those experiences. Yes. In overall youth participation in different platforms, including decision making and policy framing, is less. And in the COVID situations, we also witnessed that. Thank you. Thank you, Tech Team Lay, and all the participants for sharing those insights. And certainly, we also realize that this kind of discrimination, this kind of challenges who are youth who are facing across all the groups, but especially the marginalized youth groups who are exposed to extreme level of poverty, not having access to health, education, livelihood. And all those insights were reflected in the study. I want to show you a couple of quotes from our youth participants, which will also uh, connect with us what we are responding to this poll. Next slide. So this is Joniel from Philippines. He responded saying, I do not know when the pandemic will end. All I know is that if it prolongs, our livelihoods, education, and ultimately even our futures will be at stake. So this was his concern when the pandemic started and when the young researchers interacted with him. Uh, Another young researcher respondent from Timor-Leste, she mentioned, all my brothers and sisters are unemployed, and it has been very difficult to find jobs because we have only studied until high school. We only sell vegetables and meat that are supplied by our parents from Fatisi village. But due to COVID, all products have been worthless in the market. Next slide. And we have Nilam from India. She shared, I love to learn, but the housework has increased ever since that the schools are closed. I help with course at home as well as in the fields. My parents are working laborers. By the time I'm done with my chores, I have very little time remaining for my studies. I try to finish my other work as soon as possible so that I can study longer. Sometimes I even miss my meals or delay them. So these are just some voices which stood out in the research process, and there are many more which were ranged from health, education, livelihood, uh, and it was related to violence, it was related to economies and mental health as well. So in this session, my colleagues and young leaders from India, Manisha, and Mongolia, from Mongolia, Machime, they will share more insights. But I wanted to highlight that the research was youth-led, as Ms. Helen mentioned in her opening speech. The unique feature of this research was it was participatory, it was youth-led, it was done by youth, and it was done for the youth. And the voices from the ground, especially the voices of the marginalized group, voices of young girls, voices of LGBT groups, persons with disabilities, voices of Dalit, Adivasis, and other ethnic minorities groups were reflected in the study. And they highlighted their concerns and also also shared their recommendations. And it is very important for us to listen to those voices and see what they are telling to us. And for which I request at this moment, I request tech team to showcase our video. This video will share process of how this research was done, partners, key findings and recommendations. This is 11 minutes video, colleague. What I request you to please stay tuned in the presentation of this video and keep writing your insights, questions, remarks in the chat box so that we engage with it after this video. Thanks, and please enjoy this video.
Over 60% of the world's young people who are 15 to 24 years old live in Asia Pacific. And the reality is that 45% of the youth worldwide without work is also in our region. Many take the risk and become migrant workers. In fact, 46% of all youth migrants in Asia are women. These young people are the girls and young women from nomadic tribes. They are the gays, lesbians, or young people with disabilities being bullied in schools and community. They are the boys and young men forced to work in the farms. How can we mobilize them to advocate for their own agenda on education and other issues?
Before pandemic, International Labour Organization reported that almost half of these young people are jobless. Current pandemic has aggravated the situation. Many young people from marginalized communities are facing severe challenges. They have lost their income and face difficulties in accessing social protection and relief assistance.
Yung pagkain sa araw-araw, lalo na hindi na yung sa lugar namin hindi nabibigyan ng relief goods, walang dumarating galing sa barangay.
Yung mga challenges na kinakaharap ko ngayong COVID-19, yung limited yung pagkilos namin sa community namin. May oras kami na sinusunod na dapat gantong oras ka lang lalabas, kung kailan yung tamang oras ng paglabas, tsaka yung kung paano kami makakasurvive sa araw-araw na kailangan nga namin magtiis na hindi lalabas kasi bibili ng pagkain.
Bukan lebih lagi seperti yang orang kapal itu nggak bisa masuk ke wilayah pelelangan ikan itu.
Sebenarnya sudah betul-betul sama sekali tidak ada mau alternatif lain juga sudah dipikir, tapi memang betul-betul karena dilarang orang di lapangan di luar.
Энэ асуудал дээр төр засгаас шаардлагатай тусламж дэмжлэг үзүүлэхгүй байгаа нь харагдсан.
За үүний тод жишээ бол залуу хүмүүс ажлынхаа цомготголд орж, за үүнээсээ болоод өрхийн сарын орлого нь байхгүй болж банк санхүүгийн байгууллагт гашаа байшин өөрийн эд хөрөнгөө барьцаасан байсан. Тэд нар бүгд алдаж өдөр хоногийнхоо хоолыг аргацааж байгаа энэ дүр зураг бол нүдний өмнө илхэн харагдаж байсан.
सरकारने ऑनलाईन शिक्षण सुरू करण्याचं ठरवलेलं आहे, पण गावाकडे प्रॉब्लेम हा आहे की तिकडे अजिबात फोनसुद्धा करायला रेंज नसते, तर ऑनलाईन शिक्षण होणं तर शक्यच नाही आहे.
कमी लोकांनीच मिळून लग्न करायचं आणि कमी खर्चात लग्न करायचं. त्याच्यामुळे मग मुलींचे पालक पण लवकर म्हणजे खर्च कमी व्हावा याच्यासाठी मुलींचे पटापट लग्न करून देतात.
समुदायमा बढी नै बच्चाहरू स्कुलमा लगाइसकेपछि उनीहरू सोसियल मिडियाको मार्फतबाट गर्ल्स र बोइज चाहिँ एकअर्कामा अट्र्याक्सन भइसकेपछि उनीहरू चाहिँ सानो उमेरमा विवाह गर्ने
চ্যালেঞ্জের মুখোমুখি হয়েছি, যেমন মানে অর্থনৈতিকভাবে অনেকটা প্রবলেম হয়েছে। তারপর যেহেতু স্কুল কলেজ সবই বন্ধ, পড়াশোনা অনেকটা ঘাটতি হয়ে গেছে। তাছাড়া আমাদের বিকাশের একটা প্রবলেম হয়েছে, কারণ যেহেতু আমরা বাইরে যেতে পারতেছি না, খেলাধুলা করতে পারতেছি না, ঘরের মধ্যে আবদ্ধ থাকতে হতেছে, সেক্ষেত্রে আমাদের অনেকটা প্রবলেম হতেছে।
The Action research was useful because it shows the realities that young people face during the pandemic. During this time, our voices are not being heard. We are not included in the decision making of the government. But even if that is the case, we still make way to help our community and families. The action research also shows different activities done by young people like giving of relief goods and cleaning of the communities.
From our research, we found out that the pandemic is affecting the lives of young girls very badly. Almost 33% girls are saying that they might have to get drop out of education, drop out of formal education after the pandemic. Schools are not opened in India yet, and because of the financial needs of their families, these girls have started working in the farms on daily wages. 75% girls said that they feel stressed and tired during the lockdown because of the increased burden of domestic work, and it affects their physical as well as mental health. Early marriages of girls are already high in rural areas, but in the times of pandemic and lockdown, early marriages of girls has increased in large number.
Has serious impact in the students' learning as well as well-being, and it also has potentially widened the digital divide and equitable access to quality education. During the lockdown period, while everyone were staying at their home with their parents, with their relatives, the cases of domestic violence and abuse was also highly increased. The pandemic situation worsened the mental and physical health of the people, including the children and youth, because they were going through the problem of mental illness, anxiety, frustration, depression, and because of it the suicidal cases was also reported to be highly increased.
The key recommendations that we gather from the action research are: number 1, support youth organizations in their efforts to help in awareness raising and COVID-19 responses, such as relief operations and educational activities. Second, government's continuous financial and food assistance, provisions of hygiene kits, and job opportunities for marginalized youth and their families. Third, second chance in education, employment and training for young solo parents and young adults who have dropped out in education. Fourth, proactive response of government to prepare and provide educational requirements for children and youth for continuity of their education amid COVID-19, such as necessary support needed in blended learning, like devices, internet connection, electrification, load support. And lastly, establish and support the building of community learning centers.
And from this research in India, young girls are recommending that they need financial assistance in completing their education and also to support their families. Girls suggested that government should provide free higher education to girls, or at least increase the scholarships for higher education. And other recommendation is government should design a system to provide right information to people in the villages. Because of the lack of information or spread of misinformation, it is causing fears and superstitions in the communities.
Result to the government, like we just promoted and shared the findings and recommendations to the main responsibilities and line ministries in Timor-Leste, such as Ministry of Tourism, Community Tourism, Cultures, and the Secretary of State for Youth and Sport, Secretary of State for Vocational Training and Employment, as well as the local communities, municipal administrators, chief of villages, so that they can aware and consider those results, COVID-19 impact, so that in the future they can have a good plan to support these young people.
I personally feel that youth are the agent of change, and youth and our young researchers has proved it to some extent. So thus it is all our responsibility to promote and acknowledge the contribution of these young researchers.
Өмнө нь судалгаа хийж байгаагүй залуу судлаачийн хувьд бусадтай харилцах асуудал дээр нэлээд бэрхшээл гарсан. Судалгаа авах айл өрхтөөрөө очиход тэдгээр хүмүүс их тийм бие барьсан яг тийм өөрийнхөө дотоод сэтгэлийг нээж гаргахгүй байсан.
Яг зорилтод бүлгээ олох байсан. Яагаад вэ гэх юм бол бидний яг зорилтод бүлэг маань захын гэр хороодол захын дүүргүүд, захын бүсгүүдээр байсан.
Kakailanganin namin ngayon, siyempre yung mabilis na pag-aksyon ng government. Tapos yung pantay na pagtingin sa mamamayan. Walang pinipili. Pagpapatakbo ng pera ng bayan. Kailangan dapat record lahat eh.
Challenge na ginagawa ko para kayanin ang pandemic na to ay magdasal na sana makarecover ng buong mundo sa pandemic na to para hindi na mahirapan ang mga tao sa kawalan ng trabaho.
Thank you, everyone. It was a journey of young people to invest into their communities, listen to the ground, and articulate their lived reality in the report. And if you can see, these young people are talented, articulate, and analytical about the situations. And we are very happy that we have compiled these voices in this video format and in a report. Our original report is in the process, and it will be released soon for everyone to listen, refer, and use in your work. Maybe we can go back to the PPT. Thank you. So this work was only possible because of the 9 partners, our members in the countries. We had ASPBAE Media for Development from India, All for Education from Mongolia, New Indonesia and ASPOC from Indonesia, Campaign for Popular Education from Bangladesh, INIT Philippines, and Civil Society Network for Education Reforms from Philippines, Civil Society Education Partnership from Timor-Leste, Coalition for Education Development from Sri Lanka, and Coalition Long Left Map Education, Koble, Vanuatu. And these were the young people. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, so these were the young people who were making all the efforts to go to the community, interact with young people with proper precautions and safety. Some of the interviews were done through phone, some of the interviews done through video calling, Zoom, and that's how they collected this data and presented in this report. At this point, I want to invite my colleague and youth leader from India, Manisha, to share her reflection.
Hi everyone, I am Manisha from India. कोरोनाच्या काळामध्ये जे लॉकडाऊन झालं त्या लॉकडाऊन नंतर आमच्या ग्रामीण भागामध्ये खूप साऱ्या समस्या होत्या जेणेकरून मुलींचं नुकसान होईल, मुलींच्या शिक्षणावर त्याचा परिणाम होईल. सगळ्यात महत्त्वाची आणि अशी समस्या म्हणजे शाळा आणि कॉलेज बंद झाल्यामुळे सगळ्या मुली घरीच राहिल्या. त्यानंतर ऑनलाईन शिक्षण सुरू झालं, पण मुलींकडे गावाकडच्या मुलींकडे जर मोबाईलच नसतं त्याच्यामुळे मुलींना ऑनलाईन शिक्षण करणं अवघडच होतं आणि त्यातल्या त्यात मुलींकडे मोबाईल पण नव्हते आणि गावामध्ये नेटवर्कचा तर नेहमीच प्रॉब्लेम असतो. त्यामुळे ग्रामीण भागातल्या मुलींना शिक्षण घेणं हे खूप अवघड होतं आणि त्यामुळे काही मुली तर घरीच राहून गेल्या किंवा शाळेतून ड्रॉप आउट पण झाल्या. आणि त्यानंतर दुसरी महत्वाची गोष्ट म्हणजे लॉकडाऊनच्या काळात ग्रामीण भागांमध्ये मुलींचे इतके म्हणजे सरकारने मान्यता दिली मुलींच्या लग्नासाठी की 50 व्यक्ती असताना लग्न होऊ शकतं. तर अशा वेळी गावामध्ये लोकांना खर्च कमी आणि त्याच्यानंतर कमी लोकांमध्ये लग्न, त्याच्यामुळे गावातल्या लोकांनी मुलींचे पटापट लग्न करून टाकले. असे लग्न करून टाकले की माझ्या शेजारच्या घरी जरी लग्न होतंय तरी लोकांना माहित नाही व्हायचं. आणि ज्या मुली शिकत होत्या आता पुढे शिक्षणच बंद आहे, तर मग ते घरी असून तरी काय करणार, म्हणून त्यांचे सुद्धा लग्न करून दिले. माझ्या गावात तर एक असं झालं की एक लग्न 2 दिवसामध्ये लग्न होऊन गेलं आणि त्या मुलीला पण माहित नव्हतं की माझं लग्न होणार आहे. म्हणजे एका दिवसात कपडे घेतले, दुसऱ्या दिवशी हळदी लावली आणि लगेच लग्न पण करून टाकलं. अशा वेळेस जेव्हा आम्ही हा रिसर्च केला तेव्हा आमच्या हे लक्षात आलं की सध्या ग्रामीण भागातले सगळे लोक घरीच आहेत, रोजगार नाहीये, त्याच्यामुळे मग घरातले जे काम असतील ते सगळे काम मुली आणि महिलांनाच करावे लागत होते. आणि ज्या मुली घरी राहून शिक्षण घेत होत्या, म्हणजे घरी राहून अभ्यास करत होत्या, सुरुवातीला जेव्हा लॉकडाऊन सुरू झालं सुरुवातीला मुली अभ्यास करत होत्या, पण नंतर आपल्या आईला इतका कामाचा लोड येतोय, शेतामध्ये पण कामाचा लोड येतोय, त्याच्यामुळे मुली अभ्यासाकडे थोडं दुर्लक्ष करून आई वडिलांना शेतात आणि घरकामात मदत करत होत्या. पण यामुळे मुलींना इतका थकवा येत होता की त्या आरामाच्या याच्यामध्ये त्यांचा अभ्यास हळूहळू कमी होत गेला आणि नंतर मग त्या अभ्यासाकडे लक्ष पण देत नव्हत्या. त्या गावाच्या लग्नाचे प्रमाण तर खूप वाढलं आहे हे आहे, त्याचबरोबर जे मुलं आणि मुली घरी होते त्यांना रोजगार पण नव्हता. आणि ज्या गावाकडच्या आमच्या काही शोधिनीच होत्या 1-2, त्या पुण्याला गेल्या होत्या, म्हणजे पुण्याला नोकरीसाठी गेल्या होत्या. त्या मुलींना तिकडची नोकरी सोडून घरी यावं लागलं. आणि आता आणि गावातले काही महिला पण होत्या ज्या बाहेर कामाला जात होत्या, पण मग या कोरोनामुळे त्यांना पण घरी राहावं लागलं. आणि आता त्यांना हा पण प्रश्न आहे की त्यांना पुन्हा नोकरीला लावतील की नाही लावणार, पुन्हा त्यांना नोकरीला जाता येईल की नाही येणार, हा पण त्यांच्या समोर प्रश्न आहे. आणि त्यामुळे त्यांचा रोजगार सगळं बंद आहे. आणि हा रिसर्च सगळा करत असताना मला जेव्हा खूप म्हणजे गावाकडे आधीच मुलींना घरातून बाहेर, म्हणजे कोरोनाची परिस्थिती नसताना सुद्धा मुलींना घरातून बाहेर जाण्यासाठी जास्त परवानगी नसते, तेव्हा तर लॉकडाऊन चालू होतं. अशा वेळेस मुलींना बाहेर जाणं आम्हाला खूपच कठीण होतं की लॉकडाऊन सुरू आहे, गावातले लोक पण बोलतील की बोलत होते की कोरोना आहे, तुम्हाला काही दुसरे काम नाहीये का, घरामध्ये राहायला लावलंय तरी तुम्ही बाहेर फिरताय, असे प्रश्न करून आम्हाला मग ते बाहेर जाणं आणि मुलींची समोरासमोर मुलाखत घेणं हे सुद्धा खूप चॅलेंजिंग होतं. आणि तरी पण आम्ही त्याला सगळ्यांना तोंड देऊन आणि आमचा जो रिसर्च आहे तो पूर्ण केला. थँक्यू.
Thank you, Manisha. Manisha is a young Shodhini and youth leader in India. She works with Abhivakti Media for Development, and she shared her experiences, observations, and experiences, how the COVID pandemic has affected life of young girls in her villages. Her study have identified how the mobility of young girls, even accessing smartphones, is very difficult, and where this whole system were collapsed, education system were collapsed, and we all depended on the smartphone as a tool for education. But there are many marginalized group who were left behind in that process, and especially even the poverty was reason to access, but what Manisha is raising is a gender angle to it, where the girls, because they where the girls do not have the access to phones, and they have to depend on their brothers or fathers or other male member in the family to access smartphone for education. The another point she also mentioned that it's about the mobility. Some of the girls who went for opportunity in the cities for work and education, they had to come back because of the corona, and they lost their opportunities and they are uncertain now about their future. So thank you, Manisha, for that. Maybe we can go back to PPT, and I know that I have gone over time, but I will quickly touch upon the important points which were already discussed in the short movie. The challenges were highlighted in all the countries. These are the regional challenges which we have synthesized in the report. So most of the challenges were around physical health. People mentioned that there is an increased risk for physical health, and there is very less access for better facilities, health facilities in the rural places, in the urban poor places, for urban poor place communities, and the marginalized groups have affected in that situation. Many youth and students have lost their learning. The academic, it has affected the academic aspect. Um, because of closure of schools, students are dropping out from education. Even we chose a digital education as a one form, but then we know that we do not have enough infrastructure, enough network for accessing online education. So many people were left out in the process. Um, Almost all the countries reported that there is an increased gender-based violence. Violence against children, violence against girls have increased, and there are reported cases, but many unreported cases are still there. Increase in early marriages. It has a very strong gender component to it. As Manisha was sharing, the early marriages are happening, even the child marriages are happening. Many people have lost their livelihood. We also have witnessed the reverse migration in many countries, where the laborers who have come for the opportunities and livelihood gaining in these cities, they have to go back. They were forced to go back to the villages to survive. And we also saw that there was a stigma attached to their migration because they were looked at as a carrier of virus to the places. Fake news was the main was another concern in this process, and many people recommended that it is very important during the pandemic time to spread scientific information. We also saw that there was a toll on mental health and overall well-being. Stress, anxiety, and loneliness was increased. Next slide. And these are the key recommendations were mentioned by our young leaders in the video, but I'm highlighting here as a regional synthesis. Many young people have already taken initiatives during and after the pandemic and after the lockdown. These initiatives were relief camp, awareness, capacity buildings, and it is very important to recognize those youth initiatives and support those initiatives to sustain and create larger impact. Another recommendation is government must continue financial, employment, and food assistance to all the affected communities, especially the vulnerable groups who were already living on the margins. They need more support. It is very important to understand the education requirements of different group and to provide them those access. Apart from digital training, we need to strive and see how we can reach out to them and provide them education and not let them go out of the mainstream education. Provide scholarship, free ships are very important part. It is an incentive for young students to continue their education and support their education. Teachers training to equip them into online learning, and also in the difficult time, it is very important. Vulnerable groups like individuals with disabilities, groups coming from minorities and LGBTQI groups, they need extra attention, and we need to tailor-made the the program and pedagogy according to their need. We also need to identify the strength and huge potentials of community learning centers and to design systems how we can make them more stronger in the communities. It is very important to encourage young people and their businesses, entrepreneurship, and build their capacities and provide them support for continuing their businesses. And very important part was to take initiatives on mental health support through various parts. One could be helpline. And very happy to inform that these studies were conducted in various countries, and the groups also conducted local level action follow-up activities. So the groups started with campaigning, people did youth consultation, shared these research findings. They took this research to government and village level councils, as Jose from Timor-Leste shared how he used these findings to influence other stakeholders and make and intervene in the situation. In current year in ASPBAE, we are going to continue doing dissemination and advocacy around the work these young people have done, and also we will be initiating a research and action work around mental health support for young people. So those initiatives will be continuing this year. Thank you very much. And at this point, if yes, and as I was mentioning about the research, this is a consolidated regional report, which will be released soon. This is a cover page, and we are very happy about these findings because it compiles the youth voices and it will be a good resource for all of us. So please keep looking at social media channels and website for updates on the report. Next. Before I thank and close my session, and open the discussion, I request Chime to take 3 minutes and share their work.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm representation of All for Education National Civil Society Coalition, and I'm gonna introduce about youth work, our youth work. Our coalition have diverse group of youth-led and youth organizations like LGBT and national minority youth. Among them, Youth Policy Watch NGO sits in AFIA board representing youth. I'm gonna shortly introduce about our youth work with ASPBAE. Let's discuss policy event was held on November 2020 in context of youth constituency building activity. 30 young people from diverse groups participated in discussion and discussed the current situation in education. Among 15 of them built working group to develop proposals in higher education law and advocate Minister of Education. And our next work with YAR was YAR during COVID-19 pandemic. Our youth researchers are successfully finished their research after facing many challenges from how to do research. They gathered the information from marginalized youth about their situation during pandemic and explored way to overcome this challenge and what the potential education responses will be. This research includes youth who live in rural area, area, and orphanage, LGBT youth, national minority youth, youth with disability, and youth who live in daily wage. And our next work was here during COVID-19. Research outline printed and disseminated and published through website and articles in portal sites. They organized a meeting with the government authorities and delivered position paper to them. Yeah, during COVID-19 was timely and useful in Mongolia. For example, Human Rights Forum of NGO reports include our LGBT people case, and National Human Rights Commissioner issued recommendation to take immediate action to case of our research orphanage. And our youth researchers organized a Youth Wave NGO, and they and they raised it far from European Union and did youth action research themselves and they mapped safety of choosing location and documented non-compliance path with standards and submitted the report to government. And they accepted their suggestion and promised to take action. Okay, that was my short introduction about our youth work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chimek. And now I open the forum for a couple of comments. I request Ms. Usho from UNESCO Bangkok. She's a program specialist in UNESCO Bangkok to share her reflection or a comment now.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to just drop a message, and I just want to emphasize that for UNESCO, we've been supporting the EAR initiative for all these years because we strongly believe that EAR is a prime example of transformative education and learning, and this particular side event, we very much congratulate ASPBAE and the EAR youth leaders and all the speakers today as well, and the researchers for this very meaningful, valuable side event. And it's been very informative to hear the voices from young people on COVID experiences. And we believe that this kind of approach to learning and knowledge development is really crucial if we were to build a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient world after COVID. And we really hope that this kind of learning become a mainstay for various learners and communities, not only among EAR youth, but then also if this kind of approach spreads to other communities in Asia and the Pacific and beyond. Thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge and experiences. Very valuable. Thank you.
Hello, this is Food. Can you come in? Hello.
Thank you so much, Usho. Yes, please.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, I just have some very brief opinions about the role of organizations in promoting EAR in times of COVID. So we are actually living in times of COVID, in times of the pandemic, and we say that we have to live with it, and we have to cope with it, and we have to try to return to the new normal. So what is meant by the new normal? In which I believe that we have to say, for example, we have to resort to a lot of online learning, as said. But then online learning, in my opinion, is necessary, but it is not sufficient as a tool for education. It is not an all-round tool for education, and still in-person, face-to-face class lessons are still the most necessary. And therefore, when I look around, when I read news about around the world and see demonstrations here and there, and young people take to the street, and they expect the government to do this and that, etc. But then I think the most important thing now is for organizations to educate people, especially young people, to know about the preventative measures that they need to take so that in the shortest time, we can get rid of COVID-19. And then we can return to the real normal, not the new normal, the real normal, as we did before. And then jobs will return to people. students can go back to school. So I mean, in a word, I would like to emphasize the role of education of organizations in educating people to take good measures of preventing the disease, and to be I would like to use the quotation mark, more obedient to what the government advised us to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. Yes, online education is not enough. We need proper measures for inclusive education. Any last comment? And I see Anita's comment here, and she is mentioning about what about increase in child trafficking due to the desperate economic condition of poor parents? Yes. The COVID pandemic has affected in various forms, and I believe child trafficking is another way. Well, let's keep engaging ourselves in the chat box, and we have many other interesting sessions lined up here. And at this moment, I request, I thanks everyone to show this interesting and participation in this session. And with that, I hand over to my colleague, Anita Borkar, who is the Regional Director for Training for Transformation, and she will take us to the next session. Over to you, Anita. Anita, you are on mute.
Okay, so sorry. Yeah. Am I audible now, Sunil?
Yes, Anita, clear.
Okay, thank you, Sunil, and thank you everybody for this very, very interesting session. And we heard voices from our youth leaders and right from the field, from their own communities in different countries of our region. And I think in this webinar today, it is also imperative that we now listen and understand to what our national governments are doing in terms of policies, in terms of provisioning, in terms of delivery mechanisms, as far as youth and adult learning and education is concerned. In this regard, in 2018, ASPBAE initiated a review of voluntary national reviews, which are known as VNRs, to assess the progress of governments in implementing ALE in SDG 4, as well as in embedding ALE in the SDGs. Anita Dighe, who's our next speaker, reviewed the voluntary national reviews of 12 countries in the Asia-Pacific region from a youth and adult learning and education lens to analyze how governments are employing ALE for poverty alleviation, health promotion, climate change actions, and other SDGs. The review report is already complete and is available on ASPBAE website for wider dissemination. So you can always visit the ASPBAE website and have a look at it. It's a pleasure to introduce Anita Dighe, who's an independent consultant based in India, and she's worked for several decades in the field of literacy, education, information and communication technologies, and in open and distance learning for adults. Before she retired, she served as the director of the campus of open learning at the University of Delhi in India. So Anita ji, over to you, and we look forward to your presentation and the discussion that would follow. This is also an invitation for all of you to please write your comments, your questions in the chat box. And at the end of this session, we will then open the floor for discussion to respond to the questions that you may have for Anita ji's presentation. Over to you, Anita ji. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Anita. As Anita mentioned, the VNR, the Voluntary National Reviews, this is a project that was undertaken by ASPBAE. And by the time I got started on this project, it was September of 2019. And there was a time constraint, and I finished, because first we did an analysis of 12 country VNRs, and I did an analysis of 8 country VNRs, and ASPBAE partners did the analysis for 4 more. And then I did a synthesis report for all the 12. So what I would be presenting are the highlights of this synthesis report. So the reports that the country reports that I analyzed were Pakistan, which was for 2019, Indonesia, 2019. Yeah, next slide, please. Next, yeah. Kazakhstan, 2019. Now, as you will notice, the years vary for the country reports, and that is because these are voluntary reports, and so the countries volunteer and they write country reports, and then the UN sends out guidelines to the countries that volunteer to do the reports, and the guidelines vary from year to year, and most of the times there is a theme for that particular year. So what happens is that a lot of the country reports are based on that theme, and while they're supposed to address all of the sustainable development goals and the progress that has been made, that doesn't necessarily happen. And also we mustn't forget that some of these reports are written by governments, and so there is a sort of a tendency to exaggerate and to present a very positive or an image of the achievements that have been made. So the progress is variable, but as I said, you can see that I did the analysis for the 8 country reports, and in addition, ASPBAE partners did the analysis for 4 more. So in effect, we had 12 country VNRs. And what I'll be presenting is the synthesis report. Next, yeah. Now, what was the methodology that was used? Well, one is that the SDGs, there is only one SDG that refers specifically to education, and the reference is to quality education. So there's more concern for school education. There is mention of lifelong learning, but basically the emphasis is very much on the progress that the countries have made vis-a-vis early childhood education, primary education, senior level education, and going all the way to tertiary. So the questions that we sort of worked out a common framework to do the synthesis. So one looked at whether there was any reference to adult learning and education in the SDG 4. Then was there any reference to adult learning and SDG in education in other SDGs? What about policy issues, whether there was any reference to adult learning and education in the policy issues? What were any special organizational structures set up? And more importantly, finance. I mean, did they make any allocations? The country VNRs, did they show that they were making allocations, financial allocations for adult learning? And if so, what was the amount? Now, yeah, next. Now, I thought that before I make the present the highlights, I think there has to be some clarity on what adult literacy means, because there has been tremendous progress and development in the field of adult education and literacy, insofar as the concept of adult literacy is concerned. UNESCO has played a pivotal role. It always has. And it has always taken the lead role in defining what adult literacy means. And it started in the 60s when it was, defining what adult literacy meant. And it was simple acquisition of literacy, which meant reading, writing, and numeracy skills. Now, this was the traditional definition. Unfortunately, a lot of our governments still continue to follow this kind of an understanding of what literacy means. But UNESCO moved on, and then they talked about, in the late 60s, they talked about functional literacy, where the link that was made between literacy and the occupation that an adult followed. And it was largely aimed at farmers. And the idea was that literacy would make them more efficient. Literacy would make them more productive. So this concept of the late 60s, but it didn't work because it was mainly aimed at large farmers. So it left out the poor, the marginal farmers, and so on. So then there was a movement. In the 70s, we moved to the concept of non-formal education. Again, UNESCO plays a very pivotal role, also aided by Paulo Freire. I mean, the Brazilian educator who talked about literacy to conscientize, or literacy to raise awareness. And so you have literacy, which basically is linked to people who live in conditions of poverty and oppression. And literacy is supposed to have a liberating role. It is supposed to help them understand why they are forced to live a life of poverty and deprivation. And so then the whole concept of literacy changes. It becomes an active process of learning. Now, as we move to the 21st century, literacy becomes a whole range of life and livelihood, related issues. So it's linked to technology, health, information, your financial literacy, media, and so on. So it is better then considered to be better suited to life in the 21st century. But literacy does confer a wide set of benefits. So there are human, there are advantages. A person who becomes literate becomes more efficient, has more confidence, has a better self-image, is able to articulate better, is able to interact with others in a more confident manner, is able to access information. So there are a whole range of benefits that you can see. So these are human, social, economic, cultural, politically also, because then they participate in the, at the village level. If there is as we have in India, panchayats, they participate more effectively because they can articulate better, they have access to information, they can write, and so on. Now in 2010, again, UNESCO's pivotal role, where the Belém framework, because that is where the meeting took place. And this was commitment, all the member states, they made a commitment. And they said that the focus now would shift to adult learning and education, and the perspective would be lifelong learning. So it's not as though education would be limited to a specific period of time, as it tends to happen in the case of formal education. But it is then the adult learning and education is now a very holistic and a comprehensive system of wide and lifelong learning. And it integrates, so it goes beyond formal system of education. It integrates formal, non-formal, and informal learning. And it addresses the learning needs of both youth and adults. So now you have a very comprehensive, term which encompasses, education for adults and for youth on a lifelong learning basis. Now, I will then now present the highlights and quickly go through what this report, review showed. What one found across the country reports, DNRs, is that there was an integration of SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, in the national development policies and plans. In the case of Mongolia, Pakistan, Indonesia, their parliaments ratified the SDGs. Most governments, they either passed a new law or ensured that the SDGs would be incorporated in national policies and plans. And in the case of some, and particularly so in the case of some smaller countries in the region, they adopted the SDGs as their own national development plans. So what one noticed was that aligning, mainstreaming, and integrating SDGs into the national development policies was very essential for moving forward in the implementation of the SDGs. Yeah, next. Now, when we look at quality education, which is SDG 4, the countries have reported that they've made a lot of progress in terms of enrollment, retention, and achievement levels at primary, secondary, even at tertiary levels, and even improving gender parity. And the countries include Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Timor-Leste. Vanuatu and Pakistan, they provide no school statistics. Now this, as I said, is because, as I had mentioned earlier, that there is some variation in the way the country VNRs have been written. But what one noticed while one was doing the synthesis was that the problems persist. All of the countries are saying that there are problems in formal education. The dropout rates in some cases are very high. Education is, in other cases, is irrelevant. Your vocational education also is not adequate. So they do mention that they have a lot of problems insofar as formal education is concerned. But they also recognize that there are large sections of the population, that is children, youth, and adults, who need suitable formal, non-formal, and vocational education. So there is an acknowledgement of this fact that you do need, that large sections are getting left out, and that there is need for more appropriate education programs to be developed. Yeah, next. Now, interestingly, they don't refer, the VNRs don't refer specifically to adult learning and education, but they do mention literacy, the non-formal education, awareness programs, vocational and skills training program, lifelong learning. So now all of these programs would have relevance insofar as youth are concerned, because by and large, you find that there are large sections of population that in our countries that are getting left out, and that you have to have suitable education programs for them. They are also reporting in some of the countries that there are problems of illiteracy among youth and adults. And this is in the case of Laos, PDR, Timor-Leste, Vanuatu, Indonesia, Pakistan. But what comes across very clearly is that literacy is perceived as a standalone skill. There is no relationship with the SDGs. I mean, it's like improve the literacy skills and that's it. I mean, they do not see the link between improvement of literacy levels and achievement of SDG goals. So that link is not established. They do mention that there are problems with vocational education because the vocational education does not meet the needs of the job market. So, while there is an awareness that you need a non-formal vocational lifelong learning programs for vulnerable groups, interestingly, insofar as women are concerned, there isn't that kind of awareness or special programs for women for because adult learning and education is a gender equality strategy. But you find that by and large, they don't have special separate program for women's empowerment, nor are efforts made to integrate gender concerns in development programs. And this is a very serious lacuna, and this is something that has to be kept in mind, particularly since we're talking about youth, and we have seen the kinds of problems that young girls, the adolescent girls, are faced with. Okay. Oh God. I don't know what's happening. So by and large, now what do we see? Some countries, what we found was that I found was that they have ensured that educational programs are integrated in SDG implementation. In others, there are indicational spaces that are available. I mean, they have felt the need that they should be integrating education programs. So they've indicated spaces, but there are some where they don't even make any reference to for the need to integrate education programs in SDGs. So therefore, the picture varies. And I think that we need to now systematically work with countries in the region that are really not paying enough attention to developing educational programs. So I think there is a lot of scope for lobbying and ensuring that national governments pay attention to the importance of developing educational programs for meeting SDG goals. Okay. Now, what I did was I attempted a summary. So I prepared a table, and you can see that I've looked at these SDG goals and then seen where is the evidence. I mean, countries that have or are likely to integrate ALE in SDG implementation. So I have, on the basis of this review, I have sort of attempted where is it that they have indicated. So what you notice is that this is happening in a large number of countries, where the countries, the VNRs are showing that there is a possibility of developing suitable educational programs for achieving SDG goals in a large number of the SDGs. So this is a kind of a summary table that has been prepared. Now, on the basis of this, what I then yeah. So as I said, this is a fairly large number of yeah. Next, yeah, next. Yeah. So we go all the way down to SDG 17. Now, what is the analysis? That while no country mentions ALE in the other SDGs, but they are all either implementing or they could possibly design and implement a variety of ALE programs. But what is necessary is political commitment and policies which determine the nature of ALE interventions. This one notice is there in the case of Kazakhstan and Timor-Leste, that they have a political commitment. Development of human resources. Now, this is a prime importance. And this is mentioned in the case of Indonesia and Pakistan. In the case of Lao PDR, they're talking about ALE as one of the determinants of poverty. In the case of Sri Lanka, they're talking about climate-induced disasters. They're talking about awareness programs, capacity building programs, and programs to bring about behavioral change. But then in the case of Mongolia and Vanuatu, there is the reference to skills training and awareness programs is incidental. So as you will see, the picture is very variable. I mean, there are some countries that are committed, there are some countries that are showing interest, there are others that are not necessarily aware and are not showing all that much interest. Okay, next. Now, clearly, when it comes to policy, you have to have a clearly stated policy. There are countries that have a clearly stated policy are more likely to understand the importance of developing human capital. and are more likely to look for spaces in the process of implementing SDGs wherever suitable education interventions can be made. They're also more likely to realize that rather than one size fits all kind of programs, which you happen to see in the formal system of education, that the educational needs of different community groups are varied, and you have to have a whole set of education programs for them. SDGs do insist upon no one is left behind principle, and they do talk about identifying various vulnerable groups, but they do not talk about the need to develop suitable educational programs, formal, non-formal, or informal, to meet the education needs of each target group. And ALE has a very important role to play in multi-ethnic and multilingual societies. And this is true of a lot of countries in the Asia Pacific region. Okay, next. Now, when I looked at the organization structure, the review showed that the adoption of the SDGs happened at the highest level. So in some cases, a presidential decree was issued, a high-powered committee was constituted, chaired either by president or prime minister, and so on. A national level secretariat was set up in some cases. There are committees at the national level with representatives from government, private sector, civil society, academics, professionals. But one also noticed that while these structures existed at the national, regional, or provincial, the organizational structures at the lower levels were not mentioned. And there was, of course, they did not throw any light on the ALE delivery mechanisms. Yeah, all right, now financing. Now this was very interesting that all of the governments, they recognized inadequacies of financial resources in order to achieve SDGs. And since we're going to be discussing this in the next session, this needs to be flagged because they all have problems with inadequate financial resources. But they felt the need for effective and cohesive partnerships, and different partners at the national, local levels, the civil society groups, private sector, development agencies, international community, even remittances from abroad. But they still expect the international agencies to play a pivotal role in providing finances for SDGs. Yeah.
Anita ji, just to intervene and say that we have 10 minutes left. So a request to quickly run through the conclusions and recommendations.
Yeah. Now, one is that conclusions are that education is at the heart of SDGs, and various UN agencies have been articulating this even before SDGs were agreed upon, that you have to make the link between education and SDGs. And embedding ALE in SDGs is imperative. While ALE is not regarded as essential to dealing with problems of poverty, hunger, or reducing inequality. So the whole approach seems to be that it is good to have adult learning and education programs, but they're not essential. Now, what this review has shown is the need to recognize ALE as an essential and a cross-cutting issue for strengthening overall success of SDGs. Now, importantly, ALE in integration of gender issues, that this is very important. And most of the VNRs have not paid attention to how important ALE programs can be in ensuring that gender equality can be brought about in the long run. Yeah. Okay. Now we have to recognize that that provision of education services to the most vulnerable groups is essential. Since ALE has a variety of programs, that's the one advantage ALE has over others, is that it can respond to each one of the vulnerable groups by developing special programs. Now the learning needs are varied, so you have financial literacy programs, digital literacy, vocational skill training, awareness. It's a whole range of programs that can be all within the adult lifelong learning framework. Now, what the SDGs talk about is a whole of government, as you must have noticed earlier, that they're talking about involving various sectors of the government. So they have a whole of government and they also have a whole of society approach. But what this review is proposing is a kind of a whole of people's movement, so that educational needs of all sections of the society are met in the lifelong learning framework. And the last slide. The SDGs focus right now, the SDGs are focusing only on economic, social, and environmental dimensions. And what this review is proposing is a fourth dimension, human resource development. As a matter of fact, human resource development is an essential and a necessary dimension for the achievement of people-centered SDGs. Now, since SDGs operate in the they basically are promoting a neoliberal framework. The emphasis is on economic progress and infrastructure development. But what the review is showing that the benefits of ALE abound. So in a sense, it is debunking the notion that they're only nice to have. And we are saying how the governments are reporting how ALE strategies can be used in advancing different SDG goals. And the last one. But for all this to happen, you will have to have suitable policies have to be formulated. There would have to be clarity on how ALE programs would be implemented. And then you would have to go beyond Ministry of Education. You can't have only the Ministry of Education. You have to specify what each line ministry would do. Would there be a cell that would be responsible for planning and implementing educational programs for SDG? What would be the organizational structure at the various levels? How would the interministerial, interdepartmental cooperation and coordination be brought about? Who would these frontline workers be? Would they be full-time workers? How would they be paid? Then how would the teachers and educators from different fields, how would they contribute to ALE? And how would they be trained? How would the materials be developed? How would the monitoring and evaluation systems be put in place? And finally, and more importantly, what budgetary allocations would be made for the ALE programs? Now, these are important policy and planning questions which would need to be answered by each country for strengthening ALE in SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita ji, and well within time. So sorry for that intervention, but really it is such a detailed study, and I think all participants would have realized it because you've covered every dimension that we need to consider when we look at how ALE figures in SDG 4 and also in all the other SDGs. So thank you so much. And, the presentations will be shared to all participants. And also the report is available on the ASPBAE website, and the link is also being shared by Lei in the chat box. So this is also to invite all of you to pen down your questions in the chat box, which we can then take up in the open discussion. Now it is the time for me to say thanks again to everybody and hand over to my colleague Thea for facilitating the next session on financing. So over to you, Thea.
Thank you, Anita Borcal, my colleague, and thank you, Anita G, for that presentation. Since we are in the APFSD side event, it is important to note that in the theme under Sustainable Recovery and Resiliency, SDG 4 has not been included. And therefore, as part of the education sector, we should make sure that education is in the cluster of goals that are being reviewed now. So for example, we have to argue for education for implementation of SDG 1, SDG 2, and SDG 3, SDG 16 on peace and transparent institutions, SDG 3 on health, SDG 2 on the hunger, and SDG 1 on poverty. All of this, as mentioned by Anita G, needs to integrate education in its implementation strategy. And therefore, this is the moment for us in the education sector to do so during the APFSD and also in the high-level political forum. So thank you so much. And as we said earlier, the youth recommendations have proposed that education should be provided not only through school, but many of the young people are outside of the school, and therefore it's very important for the governments to invest in community learning centers, in non-formal education, and also in informal education. And we have seen the power and the necessity for implementing awareness raising and information dissemination through informal and non-formal means. In fact, during the pandemic, the access to information, as India mentioned, is very important. And we say correct information around the pandemic has become life-saving for many communities. And we have noted that in some communities where they did not have access to correct information, it resulted to the death of many people in some remote communities. And therefore, the VNR from an A lens has been done before the pandemic. And therefore, now we have to argue more for youth and adult learning and education during the pandemic and in building resiliency. Thank you, Anita G, for this. Okay, so now we come to the next discussion, which is financing youth education. Earlier, the youth mentioned so many recommendations around the need for support for livelihoods, the need for mental health, and the need for education outside of the school system and other learning activities. Januario in the chat box also mentioned, how can families be supported in their livelihoods? How can they do marketing of their harvest and their agricultural produce? I'm going to touch on very specific on COVID-19 recovery funds. And as we analyze the recovery funds in many countries in Asia Pacific, let's see how we can advocate so that the young people have access to these COVID-19 recovery funds. So next slide, please. And I would like to say that after my presentation, our youth researcher and youth mentor, Michelle, will also share what they're doing around budget advocacy. Okay, let me just start with the context. And this was already mentioned earlier that there has been increased poverty, but I would like to call your attention, increased poverty for youth and women. And this has been proven by the researchers of ILO, that women and young workers have been the most affected in terms of employment and job loss. Employment losses in 2020 of 114 million jobs relative to 2019, which is the base that has been used before pandemic. Employment losses were higher for women than for men, and for young workers than for older workers. So we can see that the evidence is there that young workers and women are the most affected. Poverty has been exacerbated, and COVID-19 is pushing an additional 71 to 100 million people into extreme poverty. And this is also based on the report of CCSA and also the ILO, stating that more and more people will fall into working poverty, which means that more and more families will live below $1.99 every day. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are governments doing to address the challenges faced during the pandemic and also beyond? Because we are continually experiencing the pandemic now. So as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on COVID-19 recovery funds. How are recovery funds being mobilized? In almost all countries in Asia Pacific, the governments have already set aside recovery funds for not only for health, but also for livelihoods and social protection and other enterprise development fund. However, let us just say that COVID-19 recovery funds are mostly loans and they are not grants. And based on the study of UNESCAP, multilateral development banks and international finance institutions have been providing a total of 40 billion worth of financing for Asia Pacific between March and September 2020. The support has been initially focused on enhancing public health system, and they have gradually shifted to fostering economic recovery. However, we think that with the increasing number of COVID-19 cases and the new variants, there has to be a need to, again, invest into the health system. Many of the quarantine areas who closed down in countries like in India and Philippines have now been opened again because of the increasing number of COVID-19. And therefore, there has to be a rethinking of the COVID-19 recovery funds, more funds for public health system. Now, the majority, as I mentioned, majority of the financial support have come from loans. And in fact, 96.31% are loans, and grants comprise only 0.05% of the funds mobilized. Now, this has intergenerational impact, especially the youth and children now will have to pay for these loans in the future. And so this is the reason why, even though we are in the education sector, we are very much monitoring and lobbying that the funds being mobilized for COVID-19 responses should be grants, and that instead of giving loans to countries, there should be more debt relief and more new monies to come in to support recovery funds. Okay, next slide, please. Now, the key features of the stimulus packages based on the scanning of ASPBAE is that most governments are aiming for a V-shaped recovery to get back on course. What does it mean? This means a rapid growth model under the old normal. Many countries are saying, well, let's build back better. But if we look at how the funds and how the stimulus packages are being designed, they are going back to the old normal. They are infusing money into the economy, making GDP as the main progress indicator, instead of using this as an opportunity for us to rethink our growth model, to rethink our economic assumptions. Many countries are going back, infusing money to private sector. They are infusing money to give to big businesses, not only to private sector, but especially to big businesses who can handle big funds in the hope that the economy will recover. And as you can see, the graph is like a V shape, going down economically, and they want to abruptly go up the economic growth by infusing money to the private sector. And this come into corporate income tax, deferred tax payments, corporate incentives, and interest-free business loans and guarantee fund. However, there is very low priority given to education and social sector. And there is also very little given to social protection and also to address inequity. And therefore, we in the education sector, together with the young people, should lobby against this kind of growth model. And this kind of stimulus packages are being deliberated in our parliaments and also in the executive branches in our ministries. And therefore, the young people and us, the adults, should work together to lobby and to question this kind of stimulus packages. Next slide, please. Now, but there are some good examples and there are some opportunities that we can take advantage of. So let me just give you an example of the recovery funds. For example, in Indonesia, they have invested a lot in the COVID-19 recovery plan. The health sector will receive a big budget, and this health sector spending will be on vaccine, test kits, ventilators, and incentives for medical workers and subsidy for Social Security Agency premium. So this is, the health sector is going to receive a lot of support from the Indonesian government. A big part of the COVID-19 funds in Indonesia will be for social protection budget. 10 million for families in Family Hope program and 20 million families in the staple food program. But we have to check in our communities. Are these budgets going into our communities, or are there only pockets of communities receiving this social protection budget, and therefore monitoring and is again very important. There is a plan in Indonesia for pre-employment card program, which will cover support for 5.6 million laid-off workers, informal workers, and micro and small business owners. And therefore, we should also see how the young people will benefit from these micro and small business owners in Indonesia. Earlier, it was shown in our video that the young people in Indonesia have difficulty in their livelihoods. Their enterprises have been shut down. How can this support for pre-employment card and also support for micro and social small business owners be maximized for our youth and our poor families in the remote areas in Indonesia? And there is also in Indonesia tax incentives and credit for businesses. So that we can see the different COVID-19 recovery funds in Indonesia. Next slide, please. However, we have an example in Nepal where the COVID-19 recovery funds and efforts were mobilized by doing budget cuts in the national budget. And this is really not a good approach to COVID-19 recovery funds and efforts. The government of Nepal allocated 740 million for its COVID-19 response package last year. However, because of the insufficient multilateral support in Nepal, most of the resources were realigned or taken from the other budget allocation within the national budget. And there are two fiscal responses done by Nepal in last year and continuing until this year. The increase in health spending, insurance coverage to medical personnel, importing medical supplies, and setting up quarantine centers and temporary hospitals. And then the other fiscal response is on strengthening social assistance through provision of daily food rations to the most vulnerable, subsidy of utility for low-wage customers, and partially compensate support for those in formal sector for their lost wages. Again, we have members who have done the YAR in Nepal. The thing that the strategy that we can do in education financing is to monitor if our communities are receiving this support COVID-19 recovery funds and efforts in our own communities. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now I go to the recommendations, having shown a few examples of the recovery fund. For ASPBAE, our advocacy is that the recovery and stimulus packages must focus on human capacities and well-being, which includes programs for marginalized youth. However, we say that the recovery package should not only focus on economic recovery. They should also focus on social sector and other interventions that are needed to enable the youth and adults to pivot back or even to address the inequality in economic and social situation in the countries. ASPBAE's recommendation is to propose to our governments that the recovery and stimulus packages must be within the SDG index framework. Are we able to accelerate dropout reduction? Are there learning activities for youth, children, and adults who are not in school? How can we lower the incidence of child labor? Because we know for a fact that many of the children and youth are not coming back to school and they are going to help their families earn their incomes and whatever means. How can the recovery and stimulus package narrow inequity gap instead of widening the inequality in our communities, in our countries? We should make sure that the recovery and stimulus packages must narrow the inequality in our society. How can the stimulus packages ensure learning continuity for the most left behind? And therefore, for example, how can women have access, young women have access to gender just skills education so that they can engage in the economic and social life in their communities and in their countries? And our framework also is to look into the recovery and stimulus packages from a multidimensional poverty index. How can these stimulus packages address poor health, lack of education, inadequate living standards, poor quality of work, the threat of violence, every day and living in hazardous environment. Stimulus and recovery packages should address this multidimensional poverty index. And this is an opportunity. There are many challenges brought by the pandemic, but we have shown that renewable energy and sustainable consumption and lifestyles can have a place in our daily life. For example, we have seen the increase of people using the bicycles to go to work. How can governments make sure that there are green policies in COVID-19 responses? How can they rethink the use of spaces in urban and rural areas so that there is a motivation for us to continue sustainable consumption and lifestyles? And the increase of use of renewable energy. How can this be an opportunity for governments to rethink their policies on fuel use and instead they increase the use of renewable energy? Overall, I would like to reiterate, because my presentation is focused on the COVID-19 funds and how young people can advocate and use these recovery funds to address the youth recommendations earlier. But of course, we remain in our overall demands that we need to secure the budget for education and we need to ensure quality education through formal, non-formal, and informal means of education. Thank you so much for this. And I hope you are able to put your questions and comments and your experiences also in the chat box. So please do so, so that we have more discussions around financing and how to use financing for the benefit of marginalized youth in several communities. Okay, so thank you. So now I have with me Michelle Yumuya of INET Philippines, and she has been very active in the local advocacy, budget advocacy, and she will share now what they are doing in INET Philippines in terms of budget advocacy. So over to you, Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dea, and thank you everyone for giving us this opportunity to share what is INET Philippines works in budget advocacy. So I will be sharing my screen. Okay, so I hope you're seeing my screen. Okay. So okay, ayan. Okay. So again, I'm Michelle Yumuya from INET Philippines, and now I will be sharing to you our experience in terms of advocating education financing, especially for youth and adult learning and education. So in INET Philippines, we are spearheading the alternative budget initiative engagements of the different CSOs in our country. So last year, we have submitted a budget proposal to the Department of Education, and the two main points of the proposal that we submitted is about the adequate resources that must be invested to improve quality and access of the marginalized, excluded, and vulnerable sector to education. And then second is the government will need to adjust its budget allocation in order to respond to the budgetary requirement of provision and continuity of education in the new normal. So basically what we want is for the government to put more resources to those marginalized, especially during the pandemic, and then take into consideration the access and inclusion of those people, especially that last year, many people have lost jobs, many people, many students weren't able to enroll to schools, and then it really affected the social and economic aspects of everyone, especially those in the marginalized sector. So basically what we do in our budget advocacy consists of four things. So first, we aim to provide the evidence, figures, numbers, and cases. So one way of doing this is by gathering data from the government, at the same time from the communities that we have. And then one initiatives also the reports that we gathered from the Youth Action Research, we also take into consider that in our budget advocacy framework. And then next is we establish champions among our legislators and then policymakers from the executive side. And then we also build and strengthen the constituencies from our sectors, because we also want our members and then those our stakeholders to be capacitated in also engaging in budget advocacy. And then lastly, we aim to create public awareness to expand the reach of our advocacy. So first, just a context in terms of the issues of access, equity, and inclusion in the Philippines. So in 2018, that there have been at least 24 million Filipinos aged 15 and above that were not able to complete their basic education. And then in terms of the indigenous children, only 2.4 million out of 5 million children were enrolled in kindergarten to grade 11. And then in terms of those learners with disabilities, 3.3 million children with disabilities were excluded due to inaccessible schools and disability insensitive learning environment. And then during the pandemic, estimated 3.23 million children did not enroll last school year. And then more than 3.5 million out of school youth may not be able to avail the alternative learning system during the pandemic. So this has been, this is the one of the data that we gathered from last year and one of the basis on our continuous work on budget advocacy. So, and then in terms of the budget, when we look at the allocations of the programs under the Department of Education budget, specifically those concerning the marginalized sector, so we found out in terms of the Madras education for Muslim learners, only $42.5 per learner is being spent and is being allocated and spent. And then in terms of the alternative learning system, only $13 per learner. And then in the indigenous people's education, although the proposal is $40 per learner, the expenditure is only $8 per learner. So I just tried to convert this into dollars so everyone can see the context. But so this have been the major challenges, and then the foundation of and our basis of our advocacy in the education budget, especially for those in the marginalized sector. So with that, we formulate the following recommendations. So in terms of the alternative learning system, we seek for a 30 billion pesos budget for education. So that will be 30,000 pesos per learner. And this suggestion have been also supported by one of the senator or one of the legislator in our country, which is Senator Gatchalian. And then he also stated that this will be the ideal budget for ALS learner. And just to inform everyone, due to our continuous promotion of the advocacy on alternative learning system, a law has been passed last year to institutionalize the alternative learning system in our country. And then the issue of the absorptive capacity of DepEd shall be addressed through joint delivery of the service by the DepEd, local government units, state universities, colleges through their extension services program, and non-government organization. So in terms of the for inclusive education, so we aim the piloting the establishment of 30 resource centers for learners with disabilities. So 10 each in Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. And then we proposed a budget of 3 million pesos or 90,000 per research center. So we also advocate the restoration, the reinstatement and restoration of the 100 million pesos appropriating for learning materials for learners with disabilities. So the centers, the function of the centers that we have been advocating to establish is to support learners with disabilities in general education classes, assist in the conduct of in-service trainings for regular teachers, administrators, and prospective SPED teachers, conduct continuous assessment of children with disabilities and their referral, and produce appropriate teaching materials, among others. And then in terms of indigenous people's education, we also propose the establishment of community learning centers in 100 identified IP communities without access to government school. So this includes the construction, repair of the center, production of learning materials, reading materials, and supplies, as well as curriculum and module development for IP education to be able to contextualize and customize the IP modules to the local situation. So this is the amount that we have proposed to the Department of Education. And then we also included in terms of the safe back to school, because last year when we passed this recommendation, we are in the view that we must also prepare on how are we going to transition from this new normal to going back to school. So but then right now in the Philippines, I don't know if that will be happening this year, but this is one of our recommendation last year. So we proposed the health of teachers and personnel must also be prioritized. So mass testing, provision of hygiene kits, provision of psychosocial, psycho-emotional support, monthly medical checkup as preventive measure and for keeping them well. And then because we believe that for education to continue, government must ensure that education of frontliners, and that includes the school personnel, are protected from illness and that they are healthy throughout the school year. And then we also put there an additional 2 billion pesos allocation to the current school-based feeding program budget. And then is proposed to additionally cover learners whose family incomes have dropped as a consequence to the COVID containment measures. And then the feeding program will be an essential element of the COVID-19 educational response. Okay, so those are the few of the recommendations that we proposed to the Department of Education. And then what I mentioned earlier, we also try to establish different champions aside from the Department of Education. So what I mentioned earlier, we are in connection with Senator Gatchalian to promote the advocacy on alternative learning system. And then last year, we held a discussion on public investment in terms of literacy. So we invited government officials from the Department of Labor, from the Literacy Coordinating Council, from the Technical Education Skills Development Authority, and then we also invited from different organizations. So this is one of our efforts to also try to reach out for more advocates, especially in the government side, for our recommendations to be put forward, not only in the executive, but also most importantly in the legislative side. And then, after that, this is the engagement part of our budget advocacy. So right now we are conducting different local budget advocacy. So this is actually ongoing. So we are still on the process of writing the report of this, but the purpose of this local budget advocacy is that we gather different with different sector, and then we try to capacitate them on how are they going to engage in terms of local budget advocacy. So there have been an explanation on the national and the local budget process, and then there's a workshop on what do they think is the what do they think are their proposed plans and projects for that. So we conducted this engagement through parents and teachers. So we are in partnership with Unang Hakbang Foundation. Parents and children. So we are in partnership with Unang Hakbang Foundation. And then teachers. So we have 3 organizations, TDC, Teachers Inc. and ASSERT, and then the indigenous people. So our partner here is Lakas. And then supposedly next month, we will be also doing this to our youth partners. So especially those who are your researchers. So we are still planning this because we actually want to have face-to-face engagements on this workshop. So we are still planning, but then there will be an upcoming also a budget engagement for the youth, and then the expansion of the youth cluster to also include the indigenous people youth, because right now the IP youth is included in the indigenous people organization. So we are trying for to also for also those young people from the IP sector to form their own IP youth cluster, and that will be included to our expansion of the youth cluster in it Philippines. So what we're doing in the local budget advocacy is we try to analyze the education budget, public expenditures on education with equity and gender lens specific to the sector. And then we try to identify the financing gaps and propose programs and budgets to address the gaps in equity and gender issues in the education budgets, and develop a plan of action on how to continue budget engagements in education at the sector, whether local or national. So in the next slide, I'll be showing to you a sample. So this is from our IP sector. So this is one of their output. So if you see, there's a portion that says program, policy, and then their proposed budget. So this is one of the initiatives that we do, so that our engagements with the government is backed up with what are the needs of the sector, especially in the communities. So this is only one of the example. And yes, our report is still on the process we're still in the process of writing the report. Okay, so in terms of expanding our reach, since it's pandemic, we tried to maximize the use of social media and also the use of different news agencies. So during the pandemic, we have been putting our calls on our INET website, and at the same time our Facebook page. We're trying to expand its reach and post our different calls in our page. And also we held different press conference in the past few months that aims to promote and project our advocacy. So this is one of the examples. So ASPBAE is one of the news agencies in the Philippines, and we have been featured in that news agency. So, and then there are also different news agency, and even the Philippine information agency also featured our calls on their website. So, okay. So this is just a short presentation, but to sum it up, this is what we do in the Philippines. So we try to establish evidence, both local and national, by getting figures, numbers, and cases. And also we try to establish champions from different legislatures and the engagements of constituencies. So our partners, aside from engaging them local and nationally, we also engage them regionally. So we want our, for example, our youth researchers to be also involved. For example, a webinar like this, and then different regional webinars, so that they could also understand the global context of education. So, and then lastly, we try to create public awareness to expand the reach of the advocacy, because it's also important for us to let more people know about what we're doing right now, and also to encourage more people to give to encourage more people to be advocates of education, especially on the budget side of it. So yeah, that's it. So thank you for giving this opportunity to share to all of you our experiences in the Philippines. So thank you, and I'll be giving the floor back to Miss Thea, I guess. So
Yes.
thank you again.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that very inspiring experience from the Philippines. And we are happy that the young people are really, not only doing research on the YAR or COVID, or research on education, but they are now becoming more engaged in the budget advocacy in the Philippines. Previously, the budget advocacy has been steered by adults in INET Philippines, but now more and more we see the efforts of INET Philippines to capacitate, demystify the budget process so that young people can have an active voice in the budget process. So thank you for sharing that, and I hope this will become an inspiration to other countries. And let me just say that other countries are also doing policy advocacy and budget advocacy at the national level, but this is one good example of how young people are engaging the budget process. Okay, so thank you once again, Michelle, and now I give you back to Lei for some announcement. And yes, if you have also questions for us and also comments, and then we will also read later your messages in the chat box. Yes. Okay. Over to you, Lei.
Hi, everybody. Just popping in to say that our speakers took us through these fantastic sessions from the YAR and COVID-19 to the recommendations for the provision and financing of youth and adult education. I would now like to invite everybody to keep this conversation going around youth and adult learning and education by participating in the kickoff event of the We Are AL campaign, which is coordinated by the International Council of Adult Education, or ICAE. And it will be the start of a 5-year global campaign to increase the visibility of AL worldwide and to empower civil society to speak with one voice, to advance the rights of all youth and adults to quality education and lifelong learning. And that will be at 2 p.m. Amsterdam time or 9 p.m. Manila time. And I will be putting the link to the registration form in the chat box. And with that said, I would like to invite Nimesh Moneravilia of the Coalition for Education Development in Sri Lanka for the vote of thanks and the closing. Nimesh?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hi, good afternoon. Actually, you know that I'm running between unstable connection. Shall I keep my video? Is it okay?
Yes, please. You can have your video off if that helps with the connection.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Actually, we have been having an interesting and interactive session today. For around 2 hours, we have been engulfed in the knowledge given by your precious reflections and insights. Yeah, okay, thank you. For 2 hours of welcome. A big thanks you to our speakers for lending their time and knowledge to this event. My friend Sunil Gangavani, ASPBAE Youth Coordinator, Manisha Gangod, Shodhini from India, Ms. Anita Borkar, Regional Coordinator, Training for Transformation Program, ASPBAE, Ms. Anita Dige, Ms. Thea Soriano, Regional Advocacy and Campaigns Coordinator, ASPBAE, Bachimeg Badsorik of All for Education, AFE, Mongolia, Vishelli Yumna of ENET, Philippines. We also thank Bernadette Pataniag for providing technical support. And on behalf of ASPBAE, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the participants present today for being engaged in the discussions and joining us in listening to the voices of youth and looking into the VNRS and youth and adult learning and education. The next steps would be translating these recommendations into reality. So now let's go back to work. Thank you for everyone. Concluding today's program, we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Thanks again. All the best for your future. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, I put the link to the registration form of the AL, a global AL campaign, in the chat box. Thank you, Nimesh, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And please visit the ASPBAE website, and you can also check the ASPBAE Facebook page if you want some updates for us. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye everyone and keep well, keep safe.